So first and foremost, thank you very much everyone for being here. I'm going to introduce you all. I'm Maggie Left. I'm known for the BJJ photography. I've been working in media for 16 years, and we are here for the GrappleCulture first podcast, Instagram Live, to talk about sexual harassment, sexual assault, and ways to enable better ways to have jiu-jitsu safe for everyone. Richard Presley is the owner and founder of Attack the Back, and he is the other half of GrappleCulture, for those of you who don't know him. And today we're going to have a lot of people, two of them who are not here anymore. Okay, we have Nogi world champion, crazy, amazing black belt from Gracie Barra, KENDALL. We have Holly Reusin, who is a jiu-jitsu gym owner, and also she's worked in the psychology field, and specifically she's worked with women, and she's used jiu-jitsu as her ground of study, if I'm right. And MEG, she is a jiu-jitsu activist. She is an entrepreneur, and also she's been very vocal and helpful with basically all this topic. She's been working with women in other fields, if I'm right, Meg, not just jiu-jitsu, in order to improve the environments where we work. But I want you to explain all of this way better than I did. So if you cool girls introduce yourself tiny bit. Meg, let's start with you, because you've been very vocal lately, and a lot of people have been following your ideas after everything that has been brought up by women in the jiu-jitsu community. So please.
Yeah, I guess I'm terrible at jiu-jitsu. I'm a blue belt. I try to compete, but I'm pretty bad. But I've been running businesses for a pretty long time. I have my own company, but more than that, I've been a very early stage employee in two companies which are now public. The one that people have probably heard of is called Poshmark. I was one of the first 20, 30 employees. And my lens at this is really about how do we create cultures and organizations where diversity and like a safe environment thrives. Because when I take a step back, you know, what's happening in a lot of the jiu-jitsu community is that people who just should never have started the gym are running gyms, and you add into this mix like people are very motivated to earn a lot of money, right? So they add on a couple of affiliates, they maybe don't do all the onboarding or the approvals, and that's what essentially leads us to these environments which are inherently unsafe. But there's a lot that, you know, we can do as gym owners, but also that, you know, people can do when picking the right jiu-jitsu gym in order to ensure that safety. But I think that the standard across the whole community just needs to be brought up. And I think there's a lot of, you know, false incentives given to athletes essentially who want to make money and end up running a gym when they really, that's not what they're good at. They're really good at jiu-jitsu, but they probably shouldn't be running a gym.
Yeah. You're a gym owner. What can you tell us?
Did you speak to me? I didn't hear the beginning of the question, or KENDALL.
You are a gym owner.
Okay. Yeah, as well as KENDALL as well. Boy, that's really well stated, Meg. So many thoughts on this because I've been around it for a long time. My husband and KENDALL's dad and I came to the West Coast in '95, and so he qualifies as one of those early American people to break into the Brazilian bubble out here, and in the times when nobody was making a living in jiu-jitsu then. I mean, barely speaking, I say that nobody, but the guys were all still doing privates, and And then when the schools did start evolving, it was for so many years, it was all a baptism by fire. You know, anybody that even decided to train or got into jujitsu. So you know, that was not a model where we had kids and women, men, women, and children. It was like, you know, in those years, he would ask me, do you want to, you know, I want you to learn this self-defense. And I was like almost offended, you know, watching. I was like, I am not doing that. And so anyhow, agree with everything that Meg just said. And it's just, what a beautiful thing that we're having an actual conversation about these things. It's on the one hand, it's quite a simple, you know, simple, strong, ethical business practices to follow. And what a great, I didn't realize you had been involved in a couple of startups, and that's some really cool experience. We have such an unregulated situation in jiu-jitsu, and such a huge need. I mean, we have more of a need than anybody, because look at what we do. It's so different. It's not CrossFit, it's not tennis, it's so we have such a huge need, and there's been such an evolution of things over just, you know, the last 10 years. What a phenomenal explosion for children and women. And just to touch on, I want to pass it to somebody else so we can actually have a conversation, but because I feel like I could say so much about all these things. I'm just so thrilled that there's an actual conversation around the building of culture, around the organizational change that we really need to see happen. Because, you know, when I started training back in 2006 and 7, I actually kind of dovetailed it with my schoolwork. At the time, I wasn't really sure why I was doing that exactly or what, but it was sort of driving me forward to study the women involved in jiu-jitsu, because they were such a tiny minority. And perhaps maybe Kendall was 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, and that gripped me and got me really interested in the whole topic of it, because she wasn't leaving. She was going to stay. We had to put her in judo because she wanted to compete all the time. And so we didn't have the infrastructure in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So perhaps that was one of the main driving forces. And perhaps internally for me, I really wanted to
Mom,
train.
we lost your sound.
Oh.
Might have muted yourself.
It was fine.
Am I here?
Yeah. I can hear you.
So a lot has happened in the years since 2006 when I first started, but I found when I trained that when I did finally try it, that I loved it so much, because I had been a gymnast as a young child, and it was like my first love, and I was like back into my childhood. It's such a wonderful thing. So I got hooked on many different levels and have been involved ever since. And we do have several schools, and we definitely understand the problematic issues that, and this is a huge topic, sexual harassment and assault, but we have so many other topics as well to develop around this. So just the fact that the silence has ended. You know, in 2006, I tried to interview some women, and I was met with like a brick wall. Nobody would speak. Nobody would even say anything except, oh, I just go in and train, and it's this and it's that. I mean, even a lot of the old school girls that are like the early black belts, they may not remember talking to me back then, but they did the very same thing. They were not going to talk about anything. So this is really a beautiful thing to see change on the horizon, and some accountability and some structures that we can put into place to make a better sport for ourselves, make a better organization, a better industry. It's really, really fun to see for somebody like me.
I'm going to say something. A lot of people are asking me. Yes, Holly is Kendall's mum. Yes, they are both Gracie Barra. Meg is from Unity. People are asking Meg. I'm sorry. Even if you say you're bad at it, they want to know. And yes, Richard and I are training jiu-jitsu under Roger Gracie, personally HQ, and Richard under an affiliate. I'm going to say something about what you said, Holly. Sexual harassment and sexual assault is not just happening in the jiu-jitsu community, in the grappling community. And I'm saying this because once I said that we were going to go and have this conversation, which I honestly hope is not going to be the last one, I started receiving messages saying like, oh, we're going to talk shit about the community, is going to be very bad for us, da, 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 da. No, what we're talking here happens in the media, happens, I'm sure, Kendall, you can talk about this way more than me, in wrestling, in basketball, in football. It's like, Meg, you're in the fashion industry. Hello. Like, that's everywhere, because I've been working in that industry for a long time, and it's everywhere. And it's not just with women. Men are also harassed, and men are also assaulted. We are not here to say, oh, we are the worst in the world. No, we are here to try to find solutions and create a better community. And as Holly said, for way too long, women in the world, not just in the jiu-jitsu community, have been silent. And the thing we have in this moment is that women in the jiu-jitsu community have come forward. And I think we should be very proud of those women, and very proud to be the community that is walking forward and say, we don't want this to keep happening in my community.
Yeah.
And hopefully to become an example for other communities and environments to change. I'm saying this because of some messages of people who are very afraid of change.
I would like to just quickly respond to that and say, yes, I hear the concerns, but look, we have a bit of a backlog here in our little world, our BJJ world, and we need to be really honest about that. It's a real thing. It's been absolute silence for a very long time. The women came as a massive wave in the last 15 years. Before that, there were 0 women. Like, you know, if you were lucky enough to be the particular female Gracie family member that was taught, you know, not some of them were, some of them know techniques, some of them don't. Other than that, there were no women. The schools wouldn't accept women. Oh, there's so many stories about all this. I mean, you couldn't, no wonder the early women didn't speak, because they were just feeling lucky to be there at all. They were just like everybody was feeling lucky to be there. Even the guys were feeling lucky. Like back in the day before YouTube and everything else. I mean, I remember Kendall's dad would go to a seminar and come home. I think they taught us some really good stuff. And I'm like, but you paid, right? And it was like an ancient Chinese secret. So you can imagine from 2006 and the early 2000s, that first group of black belt women, a lot of them trained with Hagen, and then coming forward till 2010, 2000 to 2015, those periods, my goodness, the things that have gone on that haven't been spoken about. And so it's time. It is really way past time for this. This needs to happen. It's going to be uncomfortable for people. It's going to be unpleasant for a lot of people, but the transformational shift needs to happen. Otherwise, we aren't going to have a sport. We're going to die.
I think what Maggie said previously, in that this is not just in jiu-jitsu, right? Like it's in all these industries, but it's essentially in any industry where there's a power imbalance. And I think what you're saying, especially Holly, is that, you know, before YouTube, before all these things happened, the power imbalance was so large, right? And now that we have all these, you know, female black belts and we have YouTube and there's a lot more democratization of information. So for the background, for people who don't know me, my girlfriend is a black belt at Unity. Her name is Margot Ciccarelli. So I see a lot of it. But now that we have more women and kids participating ever before, that balance is starting to shift. And that's why people are finally thinking, okay, maybe it's okay that I can speak out, because there are going to be people who are going to support me, and there are going to be people who are not going to silence me. And I think that shift is happening now. But we have an opportunity here to really catalyze this forward, because we're still, like, you know, massively outweighed. I think there's what, like, even in the US, maybe like 200 female black belts max. In the UK, what, like 30?
Yeah.
So it's still a huge imbalance, but I think, you know, what we can do is speak out. We can make it a topic of conversation. And I think that there are just like zero tolerance standards that need to happen across all gyms everywhere. And, you know, right now people just kind of, you know, they go on Yelp and they find a jiu-jitsu gym and like that's sort of it. And they're stuck there because of all the ingrained loyalty. And, you know, I think that's a terrible state for us to be in.
Well, we do have a very, I don't want to say complicated, but I guess it is complicated, because steeped in what we do is this hierarchical tradition and the ancient Bushido codes and all of the things that we are trying to bring forward and make a new language. We're making a modern language out of an ancient language. And not, and in addition, I mean, the jiu-jitsu technique is always a metaphor for these things. So the constant growth and change that we experience in our training, we've got to be able to, like you're saying, we've got to be able to mirror that constant growth and change on the business side or on the organizational side, or however you want to call it. That's a very tall order for us to do because of what we do. And I think I had a meeting with some Gracie Baja folks the other day, and we're adding a big section to the instructor certification platform, which is, you know, it's great that we have that we have something, and then the other teams can look at those structures and replicate those structures. That's a lot of times what has happened in recent years with some of the Gracie Baja advancements. Not that Gracie Baja is perfect, you know, but it's an attempt. And it's an attempt at awareness and building the new structures. But it's, you know, it's so very uncomfortable, just so much like training. Like you're doing great, and then you go in and white belt taps you out or whatever. And it's like you're driving home and you're like, not doing great. And in our industry is in that same sort of a process, right? And we have a very tall order. I feel it's so important to keep reminding ourselves of what we do, how we do it. And I mean, look at what we do at just the mere physiological interaction that we have humans engage in. Who else does that besides wrestling? You know, and so wrestling is a big part of our conversation as well. And even looking to like the US wrestling associations and all of the, you know, everybody has a lot of organizational and structural issues. All the sports do, but we are special. I feel we're very special, very unique. And it involves, I mean, this is just such the tip of the iceberg to be able to have a conversation about it. I honestly, for me, this is like a miracle. It's like 15 years, nobody's wanted to talk about this. What, you know, that we are all rolling around together, and how incredibly dynamic, physiologically, spiritually, psychologically dynamic that is, no matter what age you are or gender or anything. Every single person that comes in the room is having this powerful experience rolling around with other humans. I mean, who else does that? So we're bound to have problems. So as long as we're talking about the problems now, there's a hope.
Yeah, that's basically what I want this conversation, and I had this conversation with Richard to it's something that I'm going to say this, MEG kind of inspired me in a way. I've been trying to in the media in order to help women and people from different races in order to create ambience where people will feel comfortable and safe. I always had, like, I've been working in probably the worst areas, and when I'm talking about the worst, I'm talking about advertising, media, fashion, where it's not easy. Like, I've been working in music, it's not easy. Like, the things you will see and hear and take as normal, not normal, and not okay, and we still need to change a lot. And when I saw Max saying, like, there is hope, there are like tiny few things that we need to change, and that are easy to change for everyone in order to learn. Because, and I'm going to ask this to Kendall, because my experience is that a lot of what is happening is also ignorance. I'm not saying and justifying anything, but a lot of the times, and this is something that I had in media too, is that when you suddenly say to a guy, do you understand that what you just said is not right?
Yeah.
They are like, sorry, I like, they literally shock up. They are like, I wasn't, like, I didn't mean to. And I was like, yeah, that's the problem. It's like, we've been educated in a way where this is normal, and it's not. And I'm going to ask Kendall, because you are obviously a high level black belt. You've been training with the American wrestling team, right? With the like the Olympic team.
Yeah.
So that level, I'm assuming you've seen way too many things that are not normal, and we treat it as normal. Am I right?
Yeah, you cut out there for a second, but I think, wait, am I echoing or sound okay?
Yeah, we can hear you very well. Yeah.
Okay. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I was saying, like, you've been in very high level training sessions in wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and I was wondering if you found this situation yourself in this situation where people around you were saying comments or saying things that were absolutely inappropriate, and they don't even think it's inappropriate because it's like, it's normal, right?
Yeah, it's hard to say what people think about their own comments, because I think sometimes, sorry, I'm echoing myself, so it's weird to hear myself. Sometimes people say things and they don't really realize that they're inappropriate, but a lot of the times I think they know, and they're just seeing what they can get away with, like trying to test the waters a little bit, especially when it comes to like coaches and older men and adolescent young female athletes. I think that's pretty clear. Did I cut out? That's pretty clear, or you would hope it would be, I suppose. However, in that situation, a lot of times the young girls just have no idea what they're supposed to say or do, and so it just goes unnoticed. They test the waters. Now they're seeing that they're able to get away saying those things, and then the doors are kind of open, and then more possibilities start to develop, unfortunately.
Well, Kendall, you know, there's some crazy stories about the Olympic Training Center, but there's one I remember that is just kind of makes this point. Remember when you were up there the very first time, you called me and you were like, Mom, this is so crazy. I was on the bus, they were shuttling me to the airport, and there was a guy, and we were talking, and you were so excited because it was your first time up there. You were like high on the mountain, you know, you were what, 16, 17 years old. And the guy, you had this little mini conversation, and you were like, what about Greco? I might like to learn Greco. And the guy goes, well, we're not letting you guys in Greco. We already let you. He's like,
we already let you in freestyle. We're not letting you in Greco. And I was like,
but you were so shocked because you had never had anyone say anything like that to you before. Like, you were literally like, Mom, you're not going to believe this. And I was like, oh God, welcome.
And then in that same trip, I have people telling me stories about these famous wrestlers, some of the most well-known guys, sleeping with a bunch of like 18, 19-year-old girls who just got to the Olympic Training Center. They see him as a celebrity and they're just happy. Like you said, they're just like, oh my God, I get to be here. And I feel so grateful I get to be here. And now this guy is giving me some attention. And he's like, you know, so it creates this very weird dynamic where
it was a
people
shock
are able to
hear
abuse
those
their
things.
power, but also the women might not necessarily feel like it's as much of an abuse of power as it is.
And I remember too, this is just, I'm sorry to keep interjecting, but when I was when I thought I was going to get a lot of great conversations with the women when I started my schoolwork in 06, and nobody, as I said, it was like brick wall. And I remember, so I started talking to guys and I started talking to wrestlers and stuff. This is before Kendall started, way before Kendall started wrestling, many years, 5 years or something. So I remember talking to these ex-high school wrestlers at the gym one day, and they basically were laughing with the conversation. They didn't realize I was really interviewing them for one of my fieldwork projects. I guess I mentioned it, but it was informal. And they basically left me with the knowledge that what happens in high school wrestling is the guys don't want the girls there. They grope them, or they just beat them up, chew them up, and spit them out. And I was just appalled. I was like, that's real. Like, they were laughing about it. And so I was thinking, well, how do we avoid this in jiu-jitsu? Like, how do we, so, wrestling is a very big kind of sister sport for us. We have women's wrestling has grown like wildfire, the girls teams in high schools, and Kendall had a lot of experience with that. But even so, she went through it for many years as a young pioneer, not having the consciousness and awareness of what she was actually experiencing. And then to reflect on it later has been, something that you've done as the years you've pulled away from it. But things like that are almost like lifelong experiences, like even like a lot of our early jiu-jitsu ladies and even the ones now, I mean, this is all such a platform for change. I hate to go into just plain gender or men and women. It doesn't really make sense but I guess that's kind of where we're at as a starting place, that we have this kind of primary accusation where women have been hurt. Women in jiu-jitsu have been hurt by the men in jiu-jitsu, and that's like the general topic, the starting place for all this. There's clearly lots of other possibilities and things going on, but the women are such a big part of this as we go, and there still really aren't very many, of the female leaders that we'll have in the future more and more, as long as we can get some of these things right.
That's a really important part of the topic. If I mess up my speaking, it's because I'm echoing in my own ears and it's really hard. You think it's better?
Yeah, take them off because you don't need them.
Okay. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, but you need to leave them on, but just take them off your ears.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Let me make sure they're connected.
So I haven't spoken much so far, so I'll sort of have a.
Can you guys hear me through here?
Yes. So obviously, this sport is.
Hold on, sorry guys, 1 second.
It's almost like a little baby. And I think now it's really good to have these kind of conversations when the sport is ultimately so young. Because hopefully, obviously we talked about the Bushido Code and how we have almost inherited these standards that martial arts from thousands of years ago have kind of interjected. And, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is an interesting one because ultimately it was just, it started in the 80s, probably much, 70s, and with the Gracie family. And we have an opportunity here to kind of nip this in the bud, so to speak.
I sent a request
with
to you.
everything going on. Oh,
I'm
sorry. Yeah, and I think now is kind of the perfect conversation. Is this happens a lot. This happens a lot in a lot of sports. Happens a lot in a lot of industries, and it happens a lot in media. This isn't just a jiu-jitsu problem.
All right.
This is generally
okay.
a
I'm sorry about
problem.
the technical difficulties, guys. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay, online.
It's all right for you guys.
Oh, we got some feedback going on.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm just gonna have to deal with the echo. I think that's the only way we're gonna be able to do this. Sorry for everybody watching too. Anyway, so what I was just gonna say is that a big issue here is we're consistently talking about how the fact that it's like men in positions of power and then women who are not really sure how to handle that dynamic. So I think right before we had to redo the video, Holly touched on something saying how important it is to have women in these positions of power, whether it's to set the example, to set the vibe, the tone of the room, or just to have someone that people can look to and go to and speak to so that they know that someone will be listening and support them and be on their side, just the way that we were talking about how before, where I think Meg mentioned, like now that there are more women involved in this environment, we just feel like we can come out and speak a little bit more than we used to be able to, because there's someone that's going to be on our side, on our team, and it's not just going to be shoved away and ignored and shunned, or very worse situations we're talking about. People get kicked out of their gyms, they get blamed, they get labeled, they get a bad reputation. When we have women in power, and power is an interesting word because I really just mean women in leadership positions, women that we can look up to, women that have a voice, women that can make a change. When we have those women to look forward or to look to, then we know we can speak up and have a more safe environment. And that really is, I think, what we're starting to see change this dynamic significantly.
Yeah, I think that's going to make a massive difference, honestly, having women in leadership positions. And I think Meg has talked about this a lot, to be very honest. I think like
I have a counterpoint on this, which is like, that is so important. Like no one is doubting how important it is to have women in leadership positions. But I do think that people like even like overstate the role that a female black belt can play.
Yes.
And I think especially, from the lower ranks, I've seen a lot of, cases now where people are like, well, but I spoke to my female black belt and like they weren't able to do anything. And it's because people associate having a black belt or, an advanced belt with a degree of power and leadership. And that's not always the case. And I think it's very political at a lot of gyms. And I think it's very difficult for women to still speak up. And I think what KENDALL is doing is absolutely incredible, right? But we see a lot of inaction, and that's two ways. One is that people are still scared. They're scared of like cutting off their social ties, their power dynamics within the gym. They're scared that they're also going to get some sort of, punishment or blame. But the other part is I do think a lot of people just have no idea what to respond or to say. Like a lot of people don't know how important it is to say, hey, our gym has zero tolerance for sexual harassment or sexual assault. That is very clear, and this is who you should talk to if you have an issue. People assume that people understand that and this isn't going to be an issue, but I think it's just like in any industry, as you go from like the infancy of industry, as there are problems, you come up with processes and solutions to try and solve these problems. And that's kind of where we are now. And I think in each of these industries there needs to be like essentially antagonists, right? Some who have that position of power, people like KENDALL who are willing to speak up, and Samantha Cook, and also people like I would say I don't really mind what happens, but it's clear to me there's a lot of problems, and I just want to like be very loud and have opinions and sort of see what happens and be really annoying to people until change happens. And I think all of those are equally important, but everyone has to say something, because if you don't say something, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah.
It's an incredible paradox, the fact that we teach self-empowerment, but we are stuck in a hierarchical structure which all of us are aware of the issues of loyalty and the conversations around loyalty and those types of things. So here we are teaching self-empowerment and basically teaching confidence. And at the same time, we are in a structure where we're going to have leaders above us belt-wise, which may or may not signify a lot of actual responsibility. So when we talk about leadership, the question is, there's lots of questions in organizational leadership. And right now, I think at least it's very difficult for every team to suddenly take the charge and, create structures. We saw the meager attempts, we saw the over to single out the particular instances a few weeks ago. It was like a little attempt that didn't mean much, and then a little bigger attempt, and then a little different attempt with some other words. And truly, we have to get way past, like you're saying, zero tolerance, and to a zero tolerance level where everybody understands, everybody that walks into a jiu-jitsu school anywhere is not going to be at risk for these types of harassments and abuse. And I mean, how to do that by putting more women in charge of schools. I mean, that's not going to do it. So let's agree with that. But we still have the paradox there where we do want to encourage leadership and roles of responsibility for women and all people of all different types of diversity, and have that in our industry as well. So, but it isn't a cure-all. It's not going to be a cure-all. We have a lot more work to do than just that.
Yeah. I think, like, from what I can sort of gather and what I can sort of think is that you train jiu-jitsu, you get your belt, you become a black belt. As a black belt, you start to think, oh, I really like this sport. How can I make money from this sport? Your first kind of reaction is, I'm going to start up my own school. So what they've got in their heads as gym owners and school owners, etc., and probably what you've sort of thought is like, okay, my first thing in my head is mat space, students, how to make money, etc. And then as the ball starts rolling, and perhaps they've had certain behaviors in the past where they've been able to get away with it, they start to realize, oh, as this black belt and with this level of responsibility that I have, I can push the boat a little bit further. And I think that's kind of where those lines and things start to blur in regards to being an instructor. And, I think everyone's sort of, there's been a point maybe in a black belt, life or whatever, where they've started dating someone from their own gym. And it's like, where that sort of gray area starts to happen between, meeting a girl and liking her, or meeting a girl, and things sort of happen along those lines. And it's like, there is no HR, for example, in a jiu-jitsu gym. The main person that you can go to is probably the person that's doing all those illicit acts.
Or supporting, yes.
Yeah.
Or ignoring.
Yeah. And like, go ahead, Maggie.
No, I was going to say, I think like summarizing is always the same. It's like we have a massive community where we don't have any studies and workshops on specific things. When I said before, I think there is a lot of ignorance. It's because, for example, I see this with strength and conditioning. I know a lot of black belts who are teaching jiu-jitsu, and because they've never done any strength and conditioning proper workshop and proper course, when they teach the jiu-jitsu techniques, maybe they don't know how to explain something, and they are kind of injuring or enabling injuries with their students. So it's the same thing with sexual harassment, sexual assault.
That's a great metaphor.
We know there is this problem because people are telling us there is this problem, but are we going to a workshop and learning techniques to avoid this or to change this? And I think this kind of conversation, things like what Meg is proposing, things like, I'm sure, especially because of the comments, Holly, that we are receiving really beautiful comments on how you are making your gyms safe places to train. So the policies that you've already put in place are the things that we need to teach people who owns gyms, because it's true what Meg is saying. It's like, and what you, Richard, are saying is just like, yeah, we have this great black belt sport, great at jiu-jitsu, but what about the other things that you need to know? Oh yes, I learned some business. Yeah, that's great. Do you know any psychology? Like emotional empathy to people you're teaching. Do you have any empathy? Have you ever learned how to communicate your message? Have you ever learned how to protect women and children and other men? Because that's the other thing. It's true, Holly, that we need to focus on women, and I agree. But I've also seen sometimes men who are sexually harassed by other women in the gym, and no one is dealing with it because it's kind of like, great, isn't it? Well, it's not for that specific guy who's not very comfortable with the idea. So it's the same thing. It's just like, is there anyone learning how to deal with this? And I think that people like you are the perfect example of what to do, how to do it. And I would love to hear your ideas on how to improve the gyms from experience and from.
Well, you just triggered a lot of thoughts for me as you were speaking. I hope I can kind of summarize what happened in my head. One thing you and Richard both have said, and I've been sort of hinting at it, is a little bit like the honeymoon phase is over. Not sure that it was actually a honeymoon phase, but we had a phase in jiu-jitsu. Pardon me?
For some it was, for sure.
We had a phase, and like I remember I used to look when we would have a big tournament, and I used to count the number of blue belt women that were signed up, like for the pans, and post about it on Facebook and many years back. Like it was a phenomenal thing that we had a couple hundred women coming to an IBJJF event, and it was so super exciting. Anyhow, the name of the game here is organizational change, building the culture that jiu-jitsu deserves. I mean, we all love jiu-jitsu for a lot of reasons, and even the people that are like you've really touched on it. I don't want to use the word ignorant, but it's a lack of awareness. It's so just to jump away from the sexual harassment topic, think of how we treat children. How the spectrum of, like, if we operate like if we charge ourselves with the task of operating like an elementary school, then we would have certain parameters and rules that we would adhere to, that things that you do and things that you don't do. Well, we don't have those structures in place because we aren't in the school system and regulated by the state or the counties. But if we think of it that way, then we're going to operate on a higher level, or a more responsible plane, so to speak. In theory, we would.
It's in theory. I'm sorry to cut you that.
No, it's okay.
In judo, in Spain, in Europe in general, judo is like a very important sport and is very common, and Meg can tell us too. It's something that you will find in any school, basically. Mm-hmm. And we still have these cases.
Yes.
And you have like public money going to those schools.
Yes, and that comes from the history of judo, because Jigoro Kano was known as an educator in Japan, not an athlete. he's remembered as an educator. And as far as I know, in Japan, that's still 4 years of either judo or kendo is what every child does in high school. Kendo is a lot more expensive because of all the gear, and so I think a lot of them defer and end up doing judo as their PE, right? I'm
Yeah.
a little out of that topic, but in Spain and France too, I know France is very prolific, and even in Brazil, judo is a very popular sport still.
The governing kind of body of which we really lack in jiu-jitsu is very interesting, right? Like, and I think part of that is the popularity of which it took off in the US, and I think in the US it's particularly like anti-regulation. But I don't know how many people know this, but IBJJF is a for-profit organization, versus in most of the other countries the governing bodies are a non-profit organization. And this is actually one of the biggest roadblocks towards why Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is probably not going to get into the Olympics, and if it does, it'll probably be under the JJAU/JJIF system, because that's non-profit. But as a result, when you have an organization that's motivated by just money and people getting involved in tournaments, you really lack any sort of like protection for the gyms. So in the case someone raised to me that in British Judo, one of the things that they actually have for every club to become a member of British Judo, which determines whether you can get insurance for it or not. So if you can't get membership, then you can't get insurance, which means you have no gym, is you actually have to have a welfare officer that's not the head instructor. So that's someone that's not the head instructor who you can report to and talk to about safety and, you know, harassment and sexual violence, etc. But it's actually specifically designated as not the instructor, and also there for the children. And I thought that was just such a lovely and simple change. You know, it's not hard. But you know, if we don't have a governing organization that wants to do that, then that has to come from the clubs itself. I would also say that so my first job after college was at Goldman Sachs, which is a notoriously, you know, male-dominated environment, and that's hard because you are employed by someone, so it's hard to make change. But in jiu-jitsu, actually, you can just vote with your money. You can leave the gym. It's very easy, right? Like, and gyms need members in order to grow. If the gym sucks, you can just leave. And I think that's a very simple way of telling the gym that, like, you know, this culture sucks. You guys need to make changes. I'm going to leave and go somewhere else. And I think that in the past, you know, when I see, especially, you know, there's so many gyms in New York, and you see the flow of women from one gym to another, that's how it's worked in the past. You know, I see a group of women, like 10, 20 women go from one gym to another, and it's an instant clear message to everyone that, you know, there's something wrong there and they need to do something about it, or they're going to go out of business.
I found another little item that's very interesting too, and this is a side note. I appreciate your comments there, but there are many schools that feel that they have no problems at all, that the way that they operate is way above board and everything is very kosher and nothing. So I learned years ago, and we have, when we had one school, we felt that way. We were there our whole family was there every day. We were all on the mats. We were watching what everybody was doing and hearing all the words that everyone was speaking, and it was a very contained environment. And so you feel that way. You feel very safe in with your students. But inevitably, over the years, what I have found is, if you take the time to sit and talk, if you inquire, if you make inquiries, like if you go looking for reports, you're going to find something. And so this is a very curious thing, because there are lots of people that feel like everything they're doing is completely pristine. Like, I've seen a lot of statements coming through the last couple of weeks about how they operate their school and how things are. And you know, it's important to stay open-minded, I think, even when we do build these structures and have things. And it's going to be really, what you just, the examples you gave, Meg, were really great. And the judo and all of these comparisons and things that we, in other sports, you know, sports are such a political animal and a global, like, talk about, if you wanted to study globalization, you could just go right into some sports and study some sports, and you'd have a wealth of information that you could never, you know, you would just keep going and could be like the archaeological dig of your life. Sports do that for us. So that's you know, you could be a somatic psychology specialist and study sports and globalization and business and development and all of these things, go in lots of different directions with it. But just to weave back to something practical, it's like, if we ask, because of what we do, no matter how perfect or wonderful or appropriate we think the classes are, or we think what we're doing are our strategies, our culture, all these things that we're going to be building now, because now the floodgate has opened. So now the building is going to begin. People are talking about, what the hell do we do? Now everybody knows, it's all over social media. We got to do something. So the things are going to start being done. But even still, we need to remember that even when we do all of that, and we think that we're finished, or we think that we've done it, we think we've done a good job, it's always going to be the case that if we keep asking for reports, we're going to get more than we bargained for, because this is human nature. And this is sports, this is somatic psychology, and so I did a little bit of digging around with yoga and trying to, you know, I've been involved with yoga teaching as well, and some training and yoga therapy training and different things. And, you know, I'm not sure what IBJJF will do in the long run with all of this. They will have to build along with, because they are the mega organization that we're all plugged into. You know, just a little defense. Years ago, people used to get so upset about IBJJF and about the expense when they jumped, you know, it jumped from like a normal price to $150 for a tournament. And during those years, like, if you really watch, and people were always complaining that somebody's getting rich, you know, definitely people are getting rich, but they made tournaments all over the world that were empty. Nobody was there. They flew teams of people all over. They went from like 25 to 50 tournaments in 1 year. And then it jumped into the like 70s and 80s. And I mean, I don't have access to their financials, but when running my own business myself, like, it scared the living crap out of me looking at what they were doing. I was like, somebody's probably making some money, but I don't think it's what people think it is. And it may be in recent years, it's been loads of money. I don't know. I really don't have any, I'm not privy to any of that. But when I saw what they were doing, they've really, and we've taken darts too. Gracie Baja's taken a lot of darts too, and everybody's making mistakes along the way. But in the end, and at the root of it, I think people are just hoping to grow jujitsu. And really that's it, because we really believe, because we all really believe in it, and we all really love it. And you know, the financial stuff is a very curious thing, because now somebody can grow up in jiu-jitsu, get a black belt, and have a business and make a living. And 15 years ago, that wasn't really a thing. It just wasn't a possibility, barely, like hanging by your teeth. I mean, I went through it. We went through it, changing jobs and industries and struggling. And I wouldn't want to do that again, not during those years.
When I started this conversation, I said, I wanted this conversation to be a way to, and we wanted, sorry, Richard, we wanted this conversation to be something where we're going to grow and learn. I said that because, yes, the jiu-jitsu community has made mistakes. I've done mistakes. I've seen things and I haven't said anything. I've been there and I just froze. I made mistakes. we've all done them, made them, but I think it's the time to make a change. I work for the BJJ, and I can say, as Holly said, yes, they make mistakes, and yes, they try to change and evolve and improve. I don't know if it's going to take them 1 year, 2 days, 3, but I know their spirit is to try to evolve and improve. And I really hope they are going to do something about this, because the same way, for example, they are doing referee courses, it would be great if they start doing sexual harassment and sexual assault prevention course.
And you mentioned workshops, like just having workshops in different places, like I mean, I don't know if you've thought of it, Meg, but like running workshops and just doing short workshops with schools and bringing more awareness.
I'd also say, yeah, like I'm very pro people making money. I think everyone in jiu-jitsu should try and make as money as possible. My question is more like, when, you know, I think the role of a governing body like IBJJF, you're right, like they're trying to grow jiu-jitsu. But the question is, like, in trying to grow jiu-jitsu, how do you prioritize like expanding competitions versus everything else? And I think for an organization that sets out to be a nonprofit, their priorities are a little bit different. And so like they may prioritize the referees, or, you know, having the workshops, or like, you know, I understand now that when you register as a gym with IBJJF, there's like a short tick box sort of statement that you check around sexual violence, but that's sort of it. Like, do you do more regulation there, or do you do more regulation around, you know, giving out black belt certificates? Like, it seems really hard to get a black belt certificate, and, you know, given that we ban people for all sorts of things, like not spending enough time at like purple belt, I just think that we can do a bit more on this, because it's sort of like in everything that we do, right? Like if I'm more motivated to learn yoga of jiu-jitsu, I'm going to prioritize that. But how do we think about our priorities here? And is the priorities about, you know, keeping people safe first, or is it about, you know, making sure that there's going to be an IBJJF tournament in, like, you know, El Salvador?
But you know what, you just hit the nail on the head, and that's the beautiful thing. I think that right now we have everybody, whether everybody wants to realize it or not, creating safe spaces for training is what we have to be focused on. We have to be more focused on that than training. And that hurts a lot of people's feelings, you know, sorry, but it's what we have to do. If we don't do that, our sport cannot flourish. So we, in essence, don't have a choice there.
I think the biggest lie that this sport tells everyone is that they say that jiu-jitsu is for everyone. And I think also the fact that there's no egos in this sport, because there's probably some of the most biggest egos ever. But by allowing these changes and having conversations with these about changes within this sport, then yes, I do believe that jiu-jitsu can be for everyone. But until we have these conversations, and until we accept that there are things which are nefarious that go along with this sport, which go along with everything, you know, other sports as well. You know, we've had all the controversy with the gymnastics. You talked about yoga, and I mean, have you seen the Bikram documentary? You know,
so many things.
Yeah, but I said this before, that this sport is new. This sport is really new if you think about all the other sports which are out there. You know, we're probably looking in decades rather than hundreds or thousands of years. So this is a real opportunity to have these conversations, to have conversations with organizations such as IBJJF, Abu Dhabi, and all the other sort of, you know, organizations which are within this sport, and to say, okay, what do we do about this? And also have conversations with other black belts and other people within the media as well. Because, you know, this conversation has now been going on for how long? Weeks? This conversation has ultimately been going on for years. This has all been going on for years. And at some point, I'm going to say it, we've probably been implicit with it. I've heard stories about black belts that I've probably not said anything. Other people have probably heard stories about black belts and probably not ever said it. This issue within this sport is an open secret. And they got blown wide open last week with all the accusations that came out about a certain black belt. And I think we talked about it earlier as well, and about women in power. I spoke to one of the, the biggest female black belts in the world. Just sat down, had a normal conversation with her, and she really, really wants to open up her own gym. And she's like, well, no one will come to my gym because I'm a woman. And I'm like, you are probably one of the most accolade women within the sport, and probably one of the most popular women in the sport right now. If you opened up a gym, I would come train with you, because you're a great grappler. You're amazing at jiu-jitsu.
She's really good at teaching too.
Yeah, and it's like, it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. It matters whether or not you're good or not, whether you're a great teacher, and whether or not you have a school which is great for everyone. And until
there are additional question here that we should be asking
ahead.
ourselves. It's like, not only should you be a great grappler and a great teacher, but like, are you going to be a good human? And should
Exactly.
you like
A responsible leader.
A responsible leader, that's it.
Yeah.
There is someone here on the comments who pointed out something which I strongly agree with. Is Millennial Cop, who was the one who helped us with the whole audio problem, who said, yes, internal repercussions are important, but also victims needs to start taking legal actions. And that's our part of work. It's true, leaders need to improve their leadership skills and learn how to avoid these problems. As Meg said, I don't think it's just about being a great teacher or a great grappler. It's also about being a good human being and making sure that you're going to keep improving, and not just because you're at the top, there's nothing I have to learn. Because life is about evolution. And just because you became world champion doesn't mean that you don't have anything else to learn from anything else or anyone else. And in this topic, for example, there is a lot to be learned. So that's one part and that's one side, but also it's important to start taking legal actions, because social media has started this new trend in which just because we shame someone on social media and we call them out, that's not all the job. And I understand how difficult it is. I've been abused for 5 years. I know it's not easy, but we still need to start doing those things as much as we can, at least.
I think one of the biggest problems regarding that is just ultimately culture. Like, I think Meg pointed out earlier, and somebody pointed out the amount of sexual assault cases which are taken to the police and things. Very few of them are dealt with or managed with. And at one point, as a woman, you go to the police, and even the police don't hear your pleas. What do you do then? It's kind of that in itself is like, way beyond jiu-jitsu and things like that. And I think ultimately everything trickles down from the top.
Yes. Well, you guys, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You bring up some more really good points, and one of the difficulties we've been having at Gracie Baja discussing some of these things is that not everything is handled by the justice system. Well, as you just mentioned, the justice system often refuses to handle something that's in their wheelhouse. But in addition to that, there are other things that are not necessarily gonna be handled well by the justice system, or maybe it falls through the cracks, or maybe it doesn't even apply there, but it still applies to what we're talking about. And we have a great need to follow up and inquire on a whole variety of things. So I guess I really like, I love everyone's ideas. I really like the idea of having some workshops. I mean, I hadn't even, I'm sure people have mentioned that, but it's a really nice idea, just in the effort to bring awareness. Of course, there isn't a workshop already constructed to have, but I think in the end, the awareness that we develop around having these hard conversations. So sometimes the hard conversation is happening on social media now, and it's like an industry-wide conversation. Many other times the hard conversation is a one-on-one in a school, or maybe with a group in a school of something, a dynamic that's occurring. So we find ourselves in this whole new era, really, of dealing with conflict resolution. And although that's a normal thing, like I know Meg could talk about this quite a lot for organizational change and building culture and business and that type of thing. It's not something that we've encountered, you know, we just haven't, it just didn't come up quite this way until now, the need for it. But we need to do it, and we need to figure out ways. Obviously, the justice system is gonna come into play in certain cases, but not all. And boy, that's even another can of worms, because when you're talking about victims and trauma and the psychology of or experience of a traumatized individual, you can't, and we've seen this too in Gracie Baja, you can't demand somebody to go to the justice system and get the job done. You know, you're dealing with if you think of it like a wounded animal, it's like you're telling it to just, you know, fix your problem. It doesn't work like that. So most of the time, and people need lots of support, and it's a confusing for a lot of people how to handle the really difficult situations. You know, I can't even, I don't know, this just popped into my head, but it's such an uncanny thing to see somebody make a statement about a particular athlete that I've heard about for so many years. You know, it's like such a relief in that. You know, I think social media isn't like our main outlet for everything, but boy, that was such a feeling for me to go, yep, heard about that guy so many times.
I actually had a policeman reach out to me, and he was like, you know, given the imperfect justice system, like this is probably as good as it gets, like, because he didn't see another method either. And I think that, you know, while the legal action, etc., is like, you know, it's the conflict resolution, it's the end part of it, right? Like when we look to the solutions, I really think we have to start at the culture. And I think, you know, the series of questions that Richard raised is precisely it. It's like, do you like the series of questions that people go through when they start thinking about whether they want to open a gym? They just think, am I a good grappler and I'm a good teacher? But it's, do you want the responsibility of owning a gym and being that leader? Are you okay with being the cultural leader and responsible for all the people who are going to be your students? And are you going to be accountable for all of their safety? And how good, and also how good are you with finance and admin, taxes and all that jazz, right? And
so let's
frankly,
redefine
yes.
what it means to be a dojo owner or a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school owner. Let's redefine that now and let's tell the truth about what that is, instead of just being somebody that won some tournaments.
I asked on my social media, like, what does it mean to you? What does a black belt mean to you? And, you know, the vast majority of people still think that having a black belt means that you're like a phenomenal human being. And that's why people trust them. Whereas it just means that you're good at jujitsu. But I don't think we're ever going to de-link these things, because that's what it means that, you know, there's such a long heritage in martial arts about what that black belt has traditionally meant. So if we can't de-link these things, then we have to change the conversation, and we have to either, like, you know, enforce, like, make black belts, you know, maybe there's a difference between what does it mean to be a good human black belt / black belt versus something else, but people need to see that difference.
Just a black belt or a real human black belt.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in really quick, but I'm gonna take my earphones out
Okay.
so it doesn't echo. So I won't be able to hear you.
That's fine. We can say all these things now.
Okay, can you guys hear me all right?
You're echoing. So, no, you're on mute now, Kendall.
No, but turn it on and just put them close to your, like, don't put them on your face or your ears. Keep them on your hand or something.
Just put them on your desk. Just take them out and put them on your desk.
Yeah.
Or put them on your lap.
No, you need to unmute. That. Well, here
There we go.
How about now?
There you are.
It's not echoing?
No.
Nope.
Okay, I'll do my best, because if I take it out, you know how it pauses and then it'll like disconnect your earphones from your phone, and it's like a whole thing. I should have the plugged in ones.
You sound good now.
I know, but I can hear me and it's really hard to talk because I'm like a 2 seconds delayed as I'm talking. Anyway, so just to touch on a couple of things we've been talking about, since there's a lot of good topics, is number one, we have to be aware that like these organizations that have big tournaments like IBJJF and AHJP, while yes, they are interested in being governing in some sense, we don't really know if their goal is to be the governing body of jiu-jitsu in the sense that they're regulating everything that happens inside schools. It's a little bit different than like USA Judo or USA Wrestling, where they're saying, hey, we're responsible for all the wrestling in the United States. IBJJF is more of like an organization, at least from my perspective, where they're like, we're responsible for all the competitions and we have a list of black belts. It's not, to me, it doesn't necessarily seem like they are trying to take on the responsibility of we're governing jiu-jitsu internationally. Whereas Team USA is we are governing wrestling in the United States. So it's a very different dynamic, at least from my perspective. It might be different to hear from somebody of these organizations to see if that's really their goal. But if it is their goal, then yes, they need to have some kind of checking system. I like what Meg brought up with, I think it was Britain Judo, where you can't even have a club unless you have these almost like a checks and balances system. But with IBJJF, I just don't know if that's really the goal. And if that isn't the goal, the next question becomes, is there an organization that wants to take this on? Because we are a newer sport, we're not sanctioned with the Olympics. Some people want that, some people don't. But is there an organization that's willing to take on that responsibility? And then the next question is, there's two categories, in my opinion, of solving this problem. When we talk about tangible actions, like what can we really do about this? One is, what do we do when an assault or harassment takes place? And then how do we deal with that, as far as, do we go to the legal system route, or do we go to the legal system route? Do we do that in conjunction with other practices inside our school? Is that an individual academy responsibility, or is that an organization's responsibility, like Gracie Barra, Checkmat, etc.? Who does it fall on at the end of the day? And then the other conversation is, how do we do as much prevention as possible? And that's really more of the culture, the environment. And that's where, like, women in powerful positions, the onboarding process of students, the different situations you have with your staff and policies like that, those seem a little bit more minute, but those are extremely important, because those are what affect the students on a day-to-day basis. And that's what makes people feel safe or unsafe. So looking at both of those, it's sometimes hard to know where to start. I like the idea of the workshops, because this is something that could become really big. It could either be run by a governing body, it could be run by outside professionals. I love the idea of HR, and that really takes the pressure off of the school owner, and it takes the pressure off of the victims as well. So something to do with HR. And then you could accomplish this workshop and have that as part of, in Gracie Barra, we have certain schools that are like premium schools and certain schools that are not. And you can have this as a badge. Like, we have a sticker on our door that says premium, Gracie Barra Academy, or you could have a certificate. The same way people have their IBJJF certificate on the wall, so that people are like, oh, okay, you're legit, So you walk in, you're like, okay, this school is safe, or this school has at least gone to the extra mile to try to make sure they have the safest environment possible. And I also want to touch on what Holly said about asking questions, because most people are not willing to do that because it's an inconvenience and it disrupts your day and you have to change directions and really listen. And also it's like sometimes heavy to listen to all of that. But between setting policies in place, having an outside system to help with these kinds of things, like an HR person to go to, or, you know, a organizational psychologist, things like that. And that person can also help determine how to handle things with the legal system, you know, because if someone does report something and then the legal system doesn't handle it correctly according to the victim, now instead of you playing judge and jury of like, oh, she's a liar, or, oh, she's telling the truth, you have an HR person to jump in and say, okay, this person reported, this happened, but according to the facts or according to the policies of the school, this is still not okay, you need to exit, or whatever the case might be. So I think that is a big responsibility that a lot of school owners don't want to take on because it's annoying, it takes time, and it's expensive, or, you know, it's an extra expense. But I love what you guys all said. Just to summarize, a black belt doesn't mean you're a good person. Owning a school doesn't mean you know a lot about business. And if you want to have a school, it is your responsibility to make sure that what happens under your roof is kosher and people are safe. And so taking on that extra expense, time, energy, money to find somebody outside HR, or to try to change this within your organization. If you're part of a bigger affiliation, this kind of takes the responsibility away from outside governing bodies and puts it more on individuals. That is something that you have to, in my opinion, be ready to do or be willing to do if you say that you want to own a school. Because what we do is so intimate that if you're not ready to take on that responsibility, then you should not be in the position to open a school and put people of all sizes, ages, genders, past experience, traumas, jobs, biases on the mats together and say, go fight. Because if you're thinking you're ready to have that on in your environment where you're responsible for that, you have to be willing to employ outside resources to make sure those people stay safe.
Yeah.
I'm going to just one thing. What I was trying to say before when I said, let's do the extra thing and let's try to also do the legal part. I agree. Like what you said, we need people inside the gyms, maybe not every time, every single day, or people who you can go to, talk to, and they can guide you on what to do after this is happening. Because the thing is, sometimes you get that and you don't even know that you can take legal actions. You just feel ashamed. You just feel like anything you're going to say or do is going to go against yourself. So you just shut and you don't say anything. Suddenly you get inspired by other people who are talking and you're able to talk, but you're still not even aware of the legal actions that you can take to stop that person. If we have people like, as you say, like HR or psychiatrists, psychologists, people who know how to deal with these kind of cases, someone is, because I understand that if you have 100 students and you have a very small gym, to deal with this situation is going to be very difficult, and probably you're going to ask an external person to take care of these things. But if you have big gyms with a lot of students, you can have someone as part of the team who can be a counselor, someone who is going to help you, a lawyer. You can have that person working. And that's what I meant when I said like legal actions. Just so I know how difficult it is. I never talk about what happened to me in literally 25 years. So I know how difficult it is just to step forward and say, this happened to me. But the reality is that I didn't even know if I could take legal actions. And having a counselor saying, you're doing great by talking. If you want to do this, because maybe you just don't want to do it. But if you want to do this, this is how, what we're going to do. This is how you want to do it. look, this is the phone numbers of some lawyers we know, and that has helped everyone else before you, and that can help you with your problem too. That's it. Having someone there to guide you in that process.
Mhm.
I really want to, sorry, just jump in on this, because I think it's really important that we start to put the responsibility on affiliations, because they have the resources, the time, the money, the energy to get somebody involved like this, right? These big organizations. And we can't go in and fix all jiu-jitsu schools at one time. But if you take the major teams that make up the most number of schools on the planet, and we start having school owners demand or ask for, or come up with these ideas like, hey, you know, just use Gracie Barra. Gracie Barra needs to have an HR person, or an occupational, or not occupational, organizational psychologist, or a counselor, like you said, somebody on call. So that if this school out in Canada, or this school out in France, or this school out here has a problem like this, they can call in and say, hey, we need some guidance. So a student reports to the school owner reports to this person that's on call, and that person can get in touch with the victim, take statements, figure out exactly what needs to happen, give ideas about how to approach things with the legal system, if that's the path that they want to go. But someone can help walk the victim through that process, and then we can start having some more solutions. Because I think a big issue here is that we would like to imagine that a school owner would say, this bad thing happened, and now this person can't be in the school. But the reality is they have two relationships with these individual people, and now they're being put in the position of being the judge. And it's very easy from an outside perspective to be like, well, this happened and that happened, so kick them out, and there's right and there's wrong, and so handle it, you know. But we know that these situations are much stickier than just that. And so if these big organizations have somebody that these affiliate owners can go to, that is going to take a lot of the pressure off, and probably it'll be very, very effective.
I'd like to jump in as well. I don't think so. I think that maybe some of the issues as well is the students who have an issue with that gym owner. So I think what maybe needs to happen a bit more is, and I know gyms that are starting to implement this already, is the ability for someone who trains at Gracie Barra to send an anonymous whistleblowing tip to say that I'm having these issues at this gym, and I want somebody to look at this. Because as an anonymous whistleblower, and they have somebody there who is managing safeguarding and everything else, if there is an ability for somebody to anonymously say, I'm having a problem, or I know someone else who is having a problem, ultimately that kind of takes that blame away from that particular person. And when somebody wants to, in all the examples we've seen so far, if somebody wants to come forward, their name is automatically on there, and they automatically become a figure. And sometimes people don't want that. People, have been, abused and everything like that. They don't want to tell their story, because that means that everyone kind of jumps to them almost. And sometimes people just don't want that. But if Gracie Barra, Checkmat, Hodge Gracie, big affiliations had the ability for a member of the school to message safeguarding@graciebarra.com and go, I have this problem with this gym owner, I have a problem with somebody on my team. And then that independent person from that organization can then get in contact with that particular person, or then say get in contact with the gym owner and say, look, we have a problem here, we've had this report come in about your gym. Then I think that is a much better solution than if like the gym owner then goes to Gracie Barra, because ultimately the problem could be with that gym owner. I think everything trickles down from the top. So IBJJF, Gracie Barra, Checkmat. We know Checkmat have obviously made a statement about what's been going on, but now we need to know, okay, this statement has been made and this person has been kicked out of this affiliation. Fine. How do you stop it from happening again? How can you let the people who still stay silent have a voice? And honestly, the best way is by some kind of whistleblowing organization, someone who is allowed, somebody who is independently hired by these organizations as someone who manages this. It's not a very nice job, but someone's got to do it. And I think if it comes down from the higher organizations to the smaller schools, not everyone is going to, it's not going to ultimately stamp out the problem, but at least it starts to manage it in an official way.
But is the question, I think obviously the whistleblowing and having some sort of a complaint is definitely necessary, but also on the other side, like how are affiliations onboarded, right? Like what is important to like Checkmatch and like Gracie Barra? Like how do people become gym owners? So people don't really know this, but Unity actually has an affiliation in Poland. And the reason it happened was Murillo Santana, head of Unity, he had a series of like tasks that he needed these guys in Poland to complete. And it took them 5 years to do so. So it took them 5 years to become an affiliation finally. I mean, but essentially the root of this process was he was trying to determine whether they were good people. And I think that if that process and the onboarding process was much clearer, so that if you become part of Gracie Barra, these are the like cultural standards that we have across all the Gracie Barra, that is the part to me that's really, really important. The part at which we get to whistleblower and legal action, etc., like that, like there's already a lot of mess. It's very hard to fix things where the culture has already gone wrong and where there's a lot of already bad eggs, and it's hard to weed out the bad eggs. But instead, I think this question is really about how do we make sure that the right people are the people who are becoming gym owners and ultimately have responsibility for these students. And we should just be very, very blunt that the majority of jiu-jitsu athletes should never open a gym. Or maybe they can, but in tandem with someone who really understands leadership and student accountability. But like my girlfriend would be terrible at owning a gym. And there are people out there who do great jobs at owning a gym, but it's actually like inversely related to their jiu-jitsu ability. But I think being a great athlete and great teacher does not mean you open the gym. Maybe you open it in conjunction with other people, but you don't have to have that responsibility.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point.
Absolutely. You guys have brought up some really great points. All of those comments, and also it's really starting to brew for me the the topic of some of the systemic issues that we're dealing with. I think when we say systemic issues, we probably almost all of us will jump to the Me Too movement and be wondering about that, but I see a much bigger issue that we're dealing with the projections that we place on world-class athletes and the preferential treatment that is handed out. You could call it the OJ syndrome or something like that. We're having a very big problem with that, and probably all sports do. Perhaps all businesses or industries, it's like the superstars get the special treatment and they get away with murder. So the steps to take in the solution process that you guys are all saying is like the standards, we in not in every country, but in the US and several countries, Gracie Barra is a franchise. So we're under the franchise law structure, and like McDonald's. But we're not flipping burgers. So we have to, like Meg was saying, we do have to come to the point where we have to be really blunt. We are going to have to be really blunt many times in saying, no, this person is not a good prospect to develop a community model in the community. It's not the right guy or girl or person. Ultimately, I think just what we're doing today, the exercise of what we're doing and talking and sharing and opening lines of communication, the possibilities of educating and training current school owners that are, whether they were fitted or not to that position, and working in that area and working to develop these conflict resolution models that are going to be pretty vast. There's for us at Gracie Baja, we do have a very stout platform for our instructor certification program, and it does involve a background check, and there already has been some of this content, but now that will expand, and I imagine it will expand a great deal over the coming years, and it'll be a good body of knowledge that people can refer to. It's in the baby stages, so it's not like it's synchronistic that it coincided with some of these cases that have come to our attention on social media. And let's be honest, the cases that we've become aware of, these are great athletes that have done bad deeds, that we are suddenly calling out and saying, just because you're a great athlete doesn't mean you should get away with this stuff in your school. Or just because you're a great athlete doesn't mean that you should have been allowed to go around and harass people over the years, and everyone knows the rumors about you, but it's going to go into black and white. We're all going to see it now, even though everyone already knew. Maybe not your mom, but all of us knew, like we heard about it for years. And, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Like we're just getting a little bit of knowledge in a couple different places about a couple different people, and the theme of it is the person who possesses enormous athletic prowess and has been able to not play by the rules. So that's our jumping off place. That's what the info everyone's getting, everyone's mad about, everyone's screaming and yelling about. And then it's the tip of the iceberg. It's like, going to a couple privates in jiu-jitsu compared to training for 10 years. It's like there's so much more. And I just really appreciate that anybody wants to talk about it. The guys told me years ago, Holly, we're going to train now. We'll do the talking about psychology of jiu-jitsu later. Nobody wants to do that anyway. And then they didn't. Nobody did. Nobody wanted to talk. Everybody just wanted to train. I mean, that was the name of the game. And there's a lot of guys, I think, that would still say that, right now, like, come on, can we just get back to training and forget about all this mess? But so thank you very much for all of you for everything you've said. Brilliant. A lot of brilliant thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, I think this is a good opportunity now for us to wrap this up. And, for myself and Maggie, I just want to say thank you for all three of you, Holly, Kendall, and Meg, for taking up, your time on a Saturday morning to have this conversation. These conversations aren't easy, but if we don't have these conversations, then ultimately things just go back to the way they were, or continue going to the way they were. I think just to say the last point is, when in regards to the IBJJF and all these other big organizations, is that I don't think that any of them want to step up and have that responsibility to go and be the non-profit organization which also manages safeguarding as well as competition as well as everything else, because it doesn't make them money, and it doesn't ultimately just isn't within their sort of interests. But I think this is an excellent place to finish, and hopefully with this conversation, voices will be heard, and we can look at a different future for this sport and different future for a lot of these sports. Yeah, anything else to Maggie?
Richard?
Yes.
I know we're wrapping up, but I love what you said about the IBJJF and different organizations, because it doesn't make them money. It might not be in their interest, but it's also a big liability.
Yeah.
It's a big risk to say, all right, now I'm taking care of the safety of jiu-jitsu. It's like, that's getting a lot of guns pointed at you, and you're going to get in a lot of trouble. So I think just to wrap it up, like, the solutions, there are big changes that can be made, but on a smaller scale, just starting with having conversations like this, posting stuff on social media, whether you think it's silly or not, because that's what sparks these kinds of conversations. Saying things that can be a little bit uncomfortable or go against the status quo or go against popular athletes and maybe turn some heads in the wrong way, because we always look back and want to be on the right side of history, right? So what's more important to us? And then lastly, just being the change in your own school. And I would say to like listeners, that's the most important thing you can do right now. That doesn't take a lot of extra time or resources. It doesn't take setting all these new policies, getting a new governing body, you know, things like that. It just starts with being someone that people can talk to and listening, and then taking it up the ladder if that's in your power and you have the permission to do that, and just setting the culture that you can do to the best of your ability. For example, when I'm teaching classes, always I'm like, hey guys, we have a lot of different sizes, ages, genders. Make sure you're treating your partners well, where no one's getting hurt. And then little things like, I always let the women choose their partners first. I'm like, all right, ladies, choose a partner to train with. Then I go to the black belt man and I'm like, oh, hey, who do you want to roll with? But first it's the ladies. They get to choose. Then the black belt man, then the brown belt man, then the pro belt man. And again, this is not men versus women, but it's important to talk about that because that's a big part of what goes on in our dynamic. So I just think that like some tangible, actionable things that people can take away, whether you're teaching class or just training in class, like also, hey, like use the female athlete as your uke, as your partner to demonstrate. It just shows a different dynamic to the class than always having the man. So there's a lot of different things that we can do that are tangible and actionable. And then hopefully maybe these conversations spark some ideas for people with maybe a little bit more power, or we come in to be with more power if we develop different things. But I just wanted to leave, as we wrap up, some actionable things that people can do in their own academies. Meg has done a good job putting videos out about this kind of stuff too, that can be really helpful. So thanks, Richard.
Yeah, Kendall, I just want to kind of summarize what I heard you say, and that is that, you know, we have to move from an era of an accomplished black belt as the leader of a school necessarily to a responsible leader of a school is like a watchdog for all human activity and development that happens on that mat. Every single, I mean, they're not going to catch everything. They're not going to have every single awareness of every cell of everything that's going on, every emotion, every move. But the person, that's their job. It's a watchdog of a job. You're looking out for people. You're seeing if they're uncomfortable. You're trying to figure out if they're having a good experience or if they need anything. It's, you know, building champions is great. And it's fun, and we all love that. We all understand that drill, what it is. It's a fun thing, but that's not the meat and potatoes of what we do every day. So it's a tall order to be a black belt professor, coach, school owner. And I think if we can somehow redefine what that means, it isn't just being a great athlete ever. It's never going to be that. And it was that kind of for a little while, like everyone sort of bought into that idea. Well, in the early stage, jiu-jitsu was beginning to grow, but we desperately have to move past that now because it's so much more. And maybe the other martial arts have some knowledge to give us. Maybe other sports have some knowledge, other industries, people like Meg that have done work in organizational culture and building cultures and organizations, and we can just keep asking questions, keep asking all the reference points on, you know, how to build this into something that's a lot safer for students and our athletes.
Meg, can you tell us?
Oh, I think this is great. I think, look, it's all about baby steps, right? Like we can't expect everything to change in one day. But I think the key points for me are around each gym owner having the responsibility and accountability for students. I will do a call out, and I thought what Cyborg said in his statement, where he was like, I didn't do any of these things. That is like the total opposite of what we're trying to go for. But I think, you know, we have to talk about what it means to be a good person in jiu-jitsu. And I think the way that I was brought into jiu-jitsu was really around understanding that when I was given a belt by my particular professor, that also meant that he thought I was a good person, because otherwise he wouldn't attach me to the lineage. It had nothing to do with my jiu-jitsu. And I think so much of, you know, the respect and that we have for each other in jiu-jitsu is on that basis. So if we're going to give people the respect to be great humans on that basis, then we have to really impart it through every single part of this community. And what that means is that we have to be there for each other when people speak up. And I think that's a huge part of this. We have to all start having these conversations, whether you are, you know, a man or woman or non-binary, but we all have to assume that it's our individual responsibility to the community to start having these conversations, to start creating change regardless of what belt you are. And I think a number of people have reached out to me. They're like, oh, well, you know, I didn't think that I could ever do anything. And I think that is the key part. It doesn't you don't have to wait for the black belt to do something. If you see that there's something wrong, right, like you need to say something. And we see this in every single industry when there are issues, and it really just takes one person to, you know, start the conversation and start the revolution. And I'm really happy because this is at least something easy. We can all agree that sexual violence is a bad thing, right? Like, so we should all be aligned on like eradicating it together.
First thing I would like to say is massive thank you, not just for being here today and have this conversation, but for everything you've done, not just in the past few weeks, but in the last few years, trying to help the community and women, because Meg, you've done this outside of the jiu-jitsu community before. So massive thank you as a woman and obviously as a grappler. Thank you very much for coming forward and talking to us. I'm really looking forward to have this conversation and many others with all of you again, hopefully all together, and maybe some of them with each of you. I'm sure, and I'll talk about this with Richard, but I'm sure we will be happy as a company, GrappleCulture, to help you girls, women, with all those workshops if you really want to put them into an online platform or organizing them around Europe, especially, but also in the States. We will love to help you with that because we need it. And I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for this conversation. I think we still have way too many things to say and way too many ideas to give. I agree, there are a lot of small steps we can start taking. I think the first one, honestly, is to educate ourselves, all of us, and especially those in power or those who are in a very important position because of the exposure they get. That's one thing. Two, of course, you don't need to be a black belt to help others. You just need to be able to listen to others and be able to be there for others and not to judge anyone for what they are telling you, and just being able to be a bit empathetic, which I think we need for everything in our societies all around the world, and everything that has happened in the last year especially demonstrates it. So I think, as Kendall said, yes, we can all help, and small steps are going to take us a long way. So thank you, Meg, for all the videos. I'm posting and reposting them all the time because every single video you're posting, I'm like, oh, this is so important, and trying to inspire a lot of black belts and big athletes that I know follow me into trying those ideas. So thank you for that. Kendall, you're doing the same thing. I'm reading all your like points and okay, so this is I like this. So thank you for that. I think social media content in this is very, very important, and I think we can do a lot with it. Holly, brace barra is one of the most important structures in jiu-jitsu. Sometimes I feel like even more than IBJJF. So anything you do inside is going to change outside and is going to make a massive impact. So please keep doing it. I was reading out of messages on Instagram about the amazing work you've done in your academy. So please share the message, use our platform, because obviously this is GrappleCulture, but I have Maggie left and my platform is all yours to use, and Richard has attacked back and his platform is obviously all yours to use. And that goes for all of you. Meg, we cannot wait to have more content from you. Kendall, honestly, thank you for being here.
Awesome.